Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome to a best CPUs for the money video, and it seems like it's been about 7 months since I've done this video. Well, that's because it has. Yes, I haven't updated this series in a long time. I'll try to be a little bit more prompt on updating the best CPU series like I did with the best GPU series. A lot of you guys have been commenting about that. If you guys want me to do any other best of series, just leave them in the comments down below. I've heard best monitors, best power supplies. Those are a couple I've heard. If you guys want to see anything else, just leave them in the comments below. I always check those out. But with that being said, let's get right into this video. Starting things off on the Intel side, I went with the Intel Pentium G3258. It's a Haswell dual-core CPU at 3.2 GHz LJ1150, and it's only $70. You can actually find it for a little bit cheaper if you get it on sale for about $60 or $65. So this is a really good budget entry CPU, and what it is if you are the kind of person that wants to stay on the Intel, pathway, if you want to say go from a Pentium G3258, you can go up to an i5 down the line if you want to. It's $70 to start off with, and this can still run games if you pair it with a decent GPU. For some reason, a lot of people think dual-core CPUs are death to all games, and that's really not the case. I mean, Battlefield 4 can run on a dual-core CPU. I'm pretty sure the latest titles coming out in the fall are going to be able to run on dual-core CPUs. Yeah, you're not going to be getting the best FPSs, and, the performance will be hampered by it, but it's not like it's going to be unplayable or anything like this. And for $60, $70, what really more can you expect? It's a really nice dual-core CPU for, $60, like I said, and it's 3.2 gigahertz, just a fantastic price and a really good entry point into PC gaming. I'd probably recommend to get this at around a $350, $400 price point. So yeah, this is a pretty good CPU for that price point if you're a budget end consumer. Moving on to an AMD CPU, I went with the AMD 760K Richland quad-core CPU. Really awesome CPU, guys. For $90, this is a great CPU. It's an Athlon X4, and for $90, you're getting a really solid quad-core CPU at 3.8 GHz. It's socket FM2. The only drawback to this CPU is that it's 100 watts, and at these lower price points, I like to see wattage be a little lower, because if you're buying a CPU for around, $70, $90, you're probably the kind of guy that's on a budget and you can't spend the most amount of money towards the power supply, if you guys get what I'm saying. But it's a very small complaint, and most of you guys will get a power supply that'll do the trick for this, but 100 watts is a little high. You can always pick up a third-party CPU cooler, and that seems to work pretty well. But for $90, you're getting a really rock-solid quad-core at 3.8 gigahertz nonetheless, and it just performs really well. And like I said in previous videos, a lot of newer titles as we move on to the next generation are finally taking advantage of quad-core technology. A lot of games back in, a year or two ago, they were still sticking by that dual-core frame. Now a lot of games really, you see a lot of games coming out, Watch Dogs, the Shadows of Mordor that's coming out, GTA 5 probably, they're going to be utilizing quad-core, and it does help opposed to having a dual-core, but dual-cores can still run games. But yeah, for $90, you're getting a really awesome quad-core CPU at 3.8 GHz, like I said. It's just a fantastic deal, and I'd recommend to get this at around a $500 build. This seems to be the perfect entry point for a $500 build, which is something that most of you guys are looking for. Moving on, another CPU from AMD, AMD FX 6350. It's a Vishera 6-core CPU, 3.9 GHz, socket AM3 plus 125 watts, which is fairly high. $140. Right now, there's a $10 off coupon on Newegg for those of you that are interested, so you can get it for $130. Now, I threw this CPU into the list instead of the FX 6300 just because this CPU is the same price as an i3. You can get an FX 6300, which is pretty much the same CPU, a little lower clock rate, I believe a little less wattage, for about $30 to $40 cheaper. So if you're into that and you want to save $30 to $40, get that instead. The 6350 is a really awesome CPU, not in terms of just gaming. It's a really all-around CPU for a really good budget point of $130, $140. You can do video editing, live streaming, and of course gaming. More and more games as they are taking advantage of quad core, you're going to be seeing more games take advantage of 6 cores and 8 cores as well. So the FX 6350's full 6 cores are finally starting to be utilized by games. I believe Battlefield 4 was actually one of those said games that did utilize 6-core technology. So yeah, that's good to see. And the FX 6350 is just a beast of a CPU. I've recommended it so many times at this point. I've lost count, but there's a good reason to why I do. It's just for $130, and if you get the normal 6300, $110 about, you're getting a really awesome CPU that's really a multimedia CPU, and you don't see that a lot at price points like this. That's why I really like this CPU. you know, the i3 is the same price, and a lot of you guys say, why don't you go with the i3? I just think this is so much better. Yeah, the i3 might outperform it in some games. It's actually very neck and neck. The FX 6350 absolutely stomps the i3 in terms of video editing, live streaming, and just multimedia applications like that, so I just like this CPU a whole hell lot more. Moving on to a CPU that really hasn't been getting a lot of love over the last couple of, months is the AMD FX 8320. It's a Vishera 8-core CPU, 3.5 GHz, 4.0 GHz turbo. Some of you guys might be wondering why didn't I throw the FX 8350 in there, which is pretty much the same CPU, but about 0.5 GHz higher. Yeah, you can get that. That's about $20 to $30 more expensive. They're pretty much the same thing, except the clock rate is different. I like the CPU a lot. Very good in video editing, very good in live streaming. For $160, if you want something budget end that can do really good video editing, this is probably your best option, and it's kind of like the FX 6350. What I said about that still holds true to the FX 8320, but kind of amplified, so to speak. It's about $30 more expensive than the 6350, so, if you guys are into a budget end CPU, and, it's not super expensive, it's not like it's under $200, and it does video editing really well, it does gaming really well. The only drawback is that most games don't take advantage of 8 cores, so it's not like you're getting any more performance out of that. But things like live streaming, video recording with Fraps, rendering, all that kind of stuff, the FX 8320 absolutely excels at. Finally, for the last CPU on this list, I went with the Intel Core i5-4690K. It's a Haswell quad-core CPU, 3.5 GHz, LGA1150, $240. This thing is an absolute beast in gaming, and if we're talking about overclocking this, holy shit, man. Paired with a nice GPU, this is the kind of CPU you get in that $900, $1,000 build, those, kind of higher end builds. They're not really high end, I'd say, they're more mid end, but you guys get the point. Builds that are geared towards running the latest titles at 60 FPS. This is the kind of CPU you get. Pair it with a really nice graphics card like a GTX 770, R9 280X, and man, you're in for a treat as far as gaming goes. Kind of expensive at $240, one of the more expensive i5s, but, you gotta pay to play, so to speak. And, yeah, I didn't include anything above this price point just because, i7 and all that crap, the new AMD CPUs. I'm really more interested in below $300. A lot of you guys, if you have money to blow, I'm sure you can find other way, you don't give a shit if you have fucking $500 to spend on a CPU. Alright, go spend your $500. I'm here to help you guys that are on a really tight budget. So yeah, thanks for watching this video, guys. Remember, hit that subscribe button, like this video. Like I said in the beginning of the video, if you have any recommendations for me to do a future best of series, or future video ideas in general, things you guys want to see, go ahead and leave them in the comments down below. My name is Cult of Mush, and I will talk to you all later. Goodbye.